The night was cold and silent when Emily, a brave young woman looking for adventure, decided to book a stay at a secluded Airbnb deep in the mountains. She longed for a peaceful retreat away from the chaos of the city. After browsing through several options, she found a rustic cabin that seemed perfect for her getaway. Photos online showed a quaint wooden cabin situated on the edge of a peaceful lake. Majestic mountains surrounded the property, and the scenery was breathtaking. It seemed like the perfect place to reconnect with nature and relax. Emily was looking forward to her trip, but a strange feeling accompanied her from the moment she made the reservation. She couldn't identify the reason, but an uneasiness dominated her. Maybe it was just her imagination playing with her, or maybe it was something more sinister hiding in the shadows of the mountains. Finally, the day of your trip arrived. Emily packed her bags and headed into the unknown. The journey took her deeper and deeper into the mountains, where the winding road was surrounded by dense forests. The cabin was located in a remote location far from any civilization. Upon arriving, Emily was struck by the beauty of the place. The cabin was as charming as in the photos, and the lake reflected the stars like a silver mirror. Everything seemed perfect, except for one thing that caught her attention as soon as she entered the cabin. The walls of the hut were adorned with strange old paintings. Shadowy figures danced across the murals, and indecipherable symbols were carved into the wooden beams. It was as if the cabin had been designed to evoke a sense of mystery and uneasiness. Ignoring her discomfort, Emily struggled to get comfortable in the cabin. She lit the fireplace, the crackling fire filling the space with soft light. As she explored the interior, she noticed that the cabin was filled with dusty old books, each of them appearing to contain dark secrets. As night fell, Emily curled up on the couch with a book. She tried to distract herself, but the feeling that something was wrong continued to haunt her. It was as if the cabin had a presence of its own, watching her silently. Hours passed, and Emily began to feel deeply tired. She decided to retire and sleep, hoping that the daylight would bring more clarity to her mind. However, as she lay in bed, something disturbing happened. She heard a distant laugh, a laugh that seemed to come from the walls of the cabin. Her eyes widened in surprise and fear. Was it just her imagination, or was there something sinister happening that night in the mountains? The laughter continued to echo through the cabin, becoming louder and more sinister with each moment. Emily was paralyzed with fear, unable to move. She wanted to believe that she was just dreaming, but the reality of the situation was overwhelming. As the laughter echoed in the dark, Emily realized she wasn't alone in the cabin. Something or someone was there with her, hidden in the shadows, waiting. Emily lay on the bed, completely immobilized by fear, as that sinister laugh continued to echo throughout the cabin. Each laugh seemed closer, more threatening, and her heart beat wildly in her chest. With a tremendous effort, Emily finally managed to get out of bed and grabbed a flashlight. The dim light of the flashlight cut through the darkness around her as she began to search for the source of the sound. Her footsteps echoed through the quiet hallways of the cabin. The cabin was enveloped in an oppressive silence, except for the unsettling laughter that seemed to come from all around. Emily, with trembling hands, examined every nook and cranny of the cabin, but found nothing that could explain the source of the laughter. Everything was empty except for the strange paintings on the walls, which now looked even more disturbing in the flashlight light. With a growing sense of despair, Emily decided that perhaps it would be best to leave the cabin and seek help. However, when she approached the door, it closed with a bang, as if it had a mind of its own. She was locked inside that gloomy hut. The laughter continued, and was now accompanied by indistinct whispers, as if distant voices were conspiring against her. Emily felt completely isolated and defenseless, at the mercy of the shadows that surrounded her. That's when the temperature in the cabin began to drop rapidly. Emily could see her breath turn into small clouds of steam as the air around her turned chilly. She wrapped herself in a blanket, desperate to stay warm, but the piercing cold sensation persisted. The hours passed slowly, and Emily continued her frantic search for a way out. Every door and window she tried to open was inexplicably locked. It seemed like the hut was determined to keep her as its prisoner. In the middle of the night, Emily finally found herself in the strangest room of all. It was smaller than the others, with a single window that looked out onto the dark mountains. In the center of the room, there was an antique chair and a table covered in a dark red cloth. Emily hesitated, but something compelled her to discover what was beneath that cloth. She reached out and gently pulled the cloth away, revealing a pile of old letters. Each letter was sealed with red wax and marked with strange symbols. Emily picked up one of them and started reading. The letters detailed stories of ancient travelers who had gotten lost in the mountains and found this cabin. Their stories were horrible. Many of them claimed to have heard the unsettling laughter and to have been locked inside the cabin forever. Reports suggested that the hut was cursed, that something supernatural inhabited its walls. Fear gripped Emily as she read the chilling stories. She now believed that the cabin was much more than it seemed, that it was a prison for those who ventured too close to its dark reach. Suddenly, the laughter and whispers abruptly ceased, leaving Emily dead silent. She knew she wasn't alone in that room. With her heart in her throat, she slowly turned and saw a dark figure, a shadowy figure, in the window. The figure had bright, intense eyes that were not human. It seemed to emanate a malevolent and oppressive presence. Before Emily could react, the figure disappeared through the window, leaving her alone in the haunted room. With shaking hands, Emily picked up one of the old letters again and began writing a desperate message. She intended to leave behind some record of her own terrifying experience, in the hope that someone, at some point, might find her message and understand what had happened in that gloomy hut. As she wrote, the sinister laughter began to echo again, and the shadows around her writhed and danced. Emily felt the shadowy figure approaching her again. With tears in her eyes, she wrote the last words of the message, her hands shaking with fear. The final words echoed in Emily's mind as she felt an evil presence approaching, ready to take her into the dark depths of that cursed cabin. Emily found herself trapped in the cabin's bedroom, holding the letter she had written as a last testament to her terrible experience. The unsettling laughter and ominous presence seemed closer and closer, and the atmosphere was permeated with an oppressive darkness. With the flashlight shaking in her hand, Emily looked around, looking for an escape route. The windows were still locked, and the door was also hopelessly blocked. She was trapped in that dark nightmare. It was then that, in a moment of desperation, Emily noticed something peculiar about the old letters she had found. Each of them had a strange inscription written on the back. They were symbols she didn't recognize, but they seemed to form some kind of pattern. With the flashlight still in hand, Emily decided to investigate the symbols more closely. As he traced the connections between them with his finger, something surprising happened. The letter trembled slightly and emitted a faint glow. The symbols began to move, as if taking on a life of their own. Emily's eyes widened in amazement as a secret passage opened before her. A hidden wall moved to reveal a narrow, dark corridor that led to an unknown location. Terrified but with no alternative, Emily decided to follow her newfound path. The hallway was cramped and dimly lit, and the air was thick with the smell of mustiness and decay. Emily could hear the evil whispers echoing off the walls as she advanced through the sinister passage. With each step, she wondered if she was moving away from or closer to the threat that had pursued her. Finally, the hallway led her to an underground room lit by antique candles. In the center of the room, a figure sat on a dark wooden chair, surrounded by countless old letters. He was a worn-looking man with empty eyes and disheveled hair. Upon seeing Emily, the man let out a tired sigh and slowly stood up. He looked more like a tormented soul than an imminent threat. "You were also attracted to this damn place, weren't you?" he muttered in an exhausted tone. Emily nodded, unable to find words to describe her experience. The man explained that he himself was one of those travelers who had been imprisoned by the hut years ago. He discovered the curse that was plaguing the place, but was never able to escape. Instead, he became part of the curse itself, condemned to protect the cabin and its dark stories. Emily felt a surge of compassion for the man, but she also realized that her only chance of escape was to understand completely what was happening and how to undo the curse. The man handed him a letter he had written before being imprisoned. It was a kind of diary, full of information about the cabin, its secrets, and how the curse could be broken. As Emily read the diary, an ominous laugh echoed in the room, followed by the sound of rapidly approaching footsteps. The man cowered, terrified, and Emily realized that the dark threat was approaching once more. Determined to confront whatever was causing all the terror, Emily turned to face the entrance to the room. The laughter grew in intensity, and then the shadowy figure that had been chasing her finally materialized before her eyes. It was a dark and sinister entity with eyes that glowed like burning embers in the darkness. His voice was a chilling whisper that echoed in Emily's mind. "You can't escape, Emily," the entity whispered. "This cabin is our eternal prison, and now you will be part of it." Emily felt surrounded by shadows, but something inside her lit up. She remembered the information in the diary and began reciting ancient words she had found, curse-breaking words. The dark entity trembled and retreated as the ancient words filled the air. The dim candlelight flickered, and the cabin seemed to shake in response. Emily continued to recite the words with determination, channeling all her strength in hopes of breaking the curse that imprisoned everyone there. The moment Emily finished the recitation, the dark entity let out an agonizing scream and dissipated into a cloud of darkness. The cabin shook once more and then returned to silence, as if the curse had finally been broken. The man, now freed from the curse, looked at Emily with gratitude and relief. Together, they found a way to open the cabin door and escape into the cold night. In the moonlight, they looked back, seeing the cabin crumble into ruins. The curse that had kept her prisoner had finally been lifted, and Emily knew that although she had faced unspeakable terrors, her courage had set her free. The cool night air welcomed Emily and the freed man as they watched the cabin crumble into ruins. The curse that had kept her imprisoned had finally been lifted, and a sense of relief washed over Emily. The man who had shared that dark nightmare with her smiled, a smile that seemed to carry decades of suffering and redemption. He thanked Emily for facing the darkness and breaking the curse that had imprisoned him for so long. "You have impressive strength," he said. "It was your determination that freed us." Emily accepted the words with gratitude, but she also knew that there was still a lot to understand about that mysterious cabin and the curse that had haunted it. She had many questions, and the man was willing to answer them. They sat nearby while the man shared her story. He explained that the cabin was originally a peaceful haven for travelers, but something terrible happened there many years ago. A dark ritual had been performed, and the cabin was cursed, condemning all who visited it to be trapped by the dark stories and ghosts of the past. The man revealed that, like many others, he had been drawn to the beauty of the cabin and its mysterious history. He had come looking for inspiration for his work as a writer, but ended up being trapped by the very stories he hoped to tell. As the conversation progressed, Emily realized that the curse was woven from the stories and secrets of those who fell under its rule. It was a manifestation of the worst parts of their souls, forcing them to relive the horrors of the past. She also realized that the only way to break the curse was to confront her own fears and traumas, as she had done. Emily felt that even though the cabin was in ruins, there was still something that needed to be done to ensure that no one else fell under her dark spell. They decided to burn the old letters, symbols of the curse that had imprisoned so many souls. With the man's help, Emily gathered all the letters into a pile and lit a fire in the ruins of the cabin. As the flames devoured the letters, the whispers and groans of the trapped souls seemed to disappear into the night wind. When the last piece of paper turned to ash, Emily and the man felt a wave of liberation. It was as if the tormented souls finally found the peace they longed for. From that moment on, the cursed cabin became just a distant memory, a place that had been consumed by fire and darkness. Emily and the man knew they would never forget the horrors they faced, but they also knew they had prevailed over the shadows. As they walked together in the starry night, they shared triumph over evil and a special connection that could only be forged in the midst of darkness. Emily would never see the cabin again, but its dark stories would remain with her as a reminder of her courage. With the ruined cabin behind them, Emily and the man set off toward a new dawn, knowing that they had found the light in the shadows of night and that they were free to write their own destiny, unfettered by the curse that had once imprisoned them.